So I'm here to talk about skate shoes and how they have changed over the years, specifically from like the mid 90s to today. Because earlier this summer I experienced that change firsthand. I had started skating these beauties here. These are Duffs. These are from the first run. This is before they even had stitching on the tongue itself, and they just stitched this little patch onto the tongue. Um, and these are, in my opinion, a thing of beauty with only one flaw. Because I'm a huge fan of skate shoes from the mid 90s. So earlier this summer, I was wearing these as my skate shoes, but I had a bruised heel at the time, and I found that they were too tight around my heel and I needed something with a little more give. And so I was visiting California, went to my old regular skate shop, and got this pair of Lakais. These are the Riley 2, I think. Yeah, the Riley 2. And I thought they were a good looking shoe, and they certainly were comfortable. And at the time, they were great because they felt really good on my heel back here, where I'd had the bruised heel. And you'll also notice that I drew all over them when I was in jury duty recently, because when you're in jury duty, you just kind of do that kind of thing. Anyway, but I became increasingly dissatisfied with these shoes and ended up just stopping skating them, especially once my heel was better. Largely because my feet kept getting bruised. Now, not my heels, but like the sides of my feet, because they're just so thin. And obviously the bottoms of my feet can get bruised too if I do some hefty stuff. So something that I was just messing around with, like as an example of why you're more likely to bruise your feet in these, other than the thin sides, which is kind of common for skate shoes these days, is if I just kind of if I pull the sole up vertical like this and just push outward with my toes, you can see that there's like a definite bulge outwards. Like I can just push way out with just my toes. And these haven't even seen that much wear. I mean, they're practically new in most ways. And so if I can just put some pressure out with my toes or with my hand, basically like that. Imagine what it's like when you're like doing something larger and you land on something that might be irregularly shaped. How much is that going to push up into your foot then? And what kind of damage is that going to do to the bones in your foot? And that's something that I have to think about because I weigh a lot more than I used to when I skated. And it's getting better though. And the other thing, I mean, obviously this is a vulcanized sole, and that's kind of the trend these days. But the stitching, okay, so everything is like double stitched. Not that anybody really cares about that anymore because these shoes never last long enough for the stitching to even matter. But also the thickness of the upper part of the shoe, you know, the leather and the different layers. Because back when I skated shoes like this, I would intentionally buy like the longest lasting shoe I could find. And so you'll notice like on these Duffs, there is quadruple stitching. And you can see that that's really actually doing a great job in holding these together, even though they have seen a lot of skating already. And that the thickness of the leather itself means that I have not broken through on the ollies and on the kick flips. The one shortcoming of these is these metal eyelets. You can see I've gotten rid of these ones because I just kept breaking laces. These are not the original laces. These are the original laces. And I'm even coming close to breaking some just from doing some switch stuff, which I'm not doing as much of as I used to. The other shortcoming of these is this little, the inside stuff that's like this little white stuff in there. It is not lasting, so you can see that it is kind of, that all has torn out, but it's kind of inconsequential. So, wanted to examine the thickness of the two leathers here. Let's see if I can do it. See if I can get them side by side so you can really see there, kind of where they meet up. You can see the thickness of the Duffs leather here and the thickness of the Lakai leather. And to me, that's kind of a big deal. Not only does it mean that it takes longer to get a hole in the leather, But that also means that if you miss a trick and something hits the side of your foot or the inside of your foot, whether it's your board or an obstacle, that's going to do less damage, right? Even though these are kind of thin for a 90s skate shoe, especially as the 90s wore on, the shoes got a little puffier. And even though these are on the thin side, they're still like, just so much thicker and more cushy than the more modern thin shoes. What else did I want to talk about? The one thing, apart from being comfortable on my bruised heel, I did really like the Lakai insole. Mine has a bunch of dog hair on it, but I thought it's nice and thick. I mean, it doesn't really do a whole lot to counteract the lack of thickness everywhere else, but I guess if you're going to have a shoe this thin, you might as well have a quality insole. So that's nice, and I thought they were good looking and they're comfortable, and I still wear them. I wear them to work, I don't wear them to skate, but these things are just beasts. I mean, apart from the good stitching, the extra thick leather, they have great soles. I mean, the soles are very flexible, very grippy. Just because you're wearing a cup sole shoe does not mean that it is not flexible and grippy. It just means it's going to last longer, first of all. And I remember in the 90s, when I would have skate shoes and they started to wear thin on the bottom, I would not just go get new skate shoes. First, I would put an extra set of insoles in there, just so that my feet would be a little bit more, cushioned. So apart from that, we might sometimes put extra tongues in there, like we did in the 90s. But, we'd also shoe goo across all this area. I mean, we would just get, sometimes 4 to 6 months out of a good pair of shoes if you took the time to shoe goo and get extra insoles and change your laces out. Which, these days I think that's kind of unheard of. And I'm talking like 4 to 6 months of skating a couple hours a day. But for me, it's an issue as an aging skater because you'll notice I'm wearing like shorts, and you can see when I lifted my foot up that I'm doing this for a reason, just basically to show you just, even though I'm only skating like 3 or 4 hours a week at the most, just if I kind of lift up my leg, there's just bruises everywhere. I've just got, see, there's all kinds of bruising there on my heel. What else have I got there? Some kind of random thing. Most of these are kind of getting older, but there's a little cut there with a bruise, and another just random bruise spot there and there. It's like, basically, like any time I'm doing a trick and the wood part of my board or part of the truck, like the axle or kingpin or whatever, anytime part of that hits my leg, that's a bruise. And the same goes for my feet. And so while my leg is only protected by a layer of denim, because I typically skate in jeans, I'm not going to want a skate shoe that is about the same thickness as a piece of denim, and sometimes skate shoes are pieces of denim. I'm going to want something on my foot that has a little bit more thickness, cushion, comfort. So not only is it going to last longer, it's going to protect my feet from bruising, because my feet are kind of fragile. Some of the smallest bones in your body are in your foot, apart from those little tiny ones in your ears, right? But you've got lots of bones in your feet, little bones in your feet, sometimes fragile bones in your feet. And when you're an older skater who's, got a desk job and put on weight since you were young, and you've got this weight coming down on your feet on a regular basis, you can't do it with thin soles and thin uppers. You want some cushion, you want some protection. And you can have that without sacrificing, board feel, because, these soles, they're great. They're grippy. You can feel your board. It takes maybe a couple of days to break in. Actually, what I prefer over these soles are the original Etnies soles with kind of the things that kind of went across there. And they had the little circle on the heel. I love those. Those are great. But anyway, I've done enough ranting. These, amazing. I love them. Thick leather, quadruple stitching, great soles. These, they look good. They feel nice. Not when I'm skating. They just leave my feet too vulnerable, and they just don't make them like they used to. But what do they make like they used to?